This is Sky News. Infighting, pressure from the backbenches and even talks of an attempted coup. The tension within government's high. There's so much to talk about this week, and where better than on this show where I interview people who have something to say about the world today and how it's changing. Good evening. This week, the Prime Minister took to the stage in Birmingham to speak to both her party members and voters. With Labour commanding huge leads in the polls, it appears the public have taken a look at the Conservatives under Liz Truss and don't much like what they see. Her message this week that she understands what voters are going through and she's on their side.
I have delivered in very difficult circumstances for the British people.
We have a plan and we need to get on and deliver it.
This is a politician in trouble after he was forced to abolish his plan. Was it a mistake to introduce the top rate of tax?
I think what we saw from the Chancellor just then was a plan for growth.
They want the Prime Minister to commit to lifting benefits by inflation, not earnings.
In the case of politicians, you must take your own side with you.
What's your message to MPs and infighting? What would you like to say to them?
Unite behind the Prime Minister. She's going to win.
This is surely the worst start of any Prime Minister.
Well, let's remember what we were facing 4 weeks ago.
But do you accept that it's been a bad start?
We were facing families having energy bills of up to £6,000. Let's get them removed. I have three priorities for our economy: growth, growth and growth.
Liz Truss is trying to project strength and the people in the room seem to like it. But as she herself acknowledged, this has been a difficult few weeks. Can you unite the party, Prime Minister? Well, tonight we hear from one former Tory donor who has since stopped his donations to the party and has now become a member of the Labour Party. I spoke to businessman Gareth Quarry a little earlier. Gareth, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Now, you're a successful entrepreneur. You're married to Jill. You're also a father of 4. And in this interview, when we get a bit along, I'm going to talk to you all about your backstory and how you came to be as successful as you are. But what I'd like to start off with today is why we're here, why you're here. You've been a Conservative voter all your life. I think you were a Conservative Party member at times, were you?
That's right.
You were a Conservative donor. You've given tens of thousands to the party under David Cameron and then Theresa May, and then you stopped. What happened?
I think it was a gradual realisation that the inequality in this country has got ever more marked. And I do think, sitting here today, I think it's more marked than ever before. And I just couldn't sit by being in a very privileged position. You know, I have got very lucky in business. I have made a lot of money, and I could not sit by and just watch that happen. And so the turning point was May leaving and Johnson arriving, and the realisation that some politicians are only in it for themselves. And I had to therefore do a very radical thing, which will no doubt make me a pariah in a number of areas, but you've got to do the right thing.
We'll come on to the radical thing you did, but just to go back to Johnson and this being a turning point, this was a politician who spoke about levelling up, who brought together a coalition of red wall voters as well as the more traditional home county voters of the Conservatives. He raised taxes to put money into the NHS. Was he not your type of Tory? Because if anything, he was on the centre ground, wasn't he, Boris Johnson?
Yeah, I think the problem with Boris is his entire life, from what I've read, he's gone about getting what he wants, a significant amount of which is about personal Boris aggrandisement.
So it was Boris Johnson's, not brand of conservatism necessarily, but his set of values that made you switch off from the party?
Yes, that's when I wrote to the party high command and said, if that's going to come to pass, and this was before he got in, but it was clear the direction of travel, if that's going to come to the pass, then I will remove my funding.
And Gareth, was that also because you would say you are a One Nation pro-EU Conservative, that is the wing of the party that you sat on and that Boris Johnson somehow went against that? Was his Brexit credentials something that really bothered you?
Yes, I mean, this is a man who had 2 speeches in his pocket one fatal weekend, and he selected the Leave speech, I suspect largely because it got him into number 10 on a pretty guaranteed basis. Again, you can't take fundamental decisions for our country which will bind our country and impact our country for generations to come. You can't base that on what I personally want to achieve. So, yes, I did vote Remain, but I absolutely accept the judgment of the country. I'm not sure something of that magnitude should have been done on a straight, simple majority. If you think about it, in corporate life, anything of that significance would have to have a slightly higher bar than 50.1%. But those were the rules. That's what was decided, and so we live with it.
You might have disagreed with David Cameron on holding that referendum, but you didn't stop supporting the party because of Brexit. It was because of Boris Johnson.
Yes.
Yes.
And I had conversations in a very small group over a dinner with Cameron before he went to Germany to try and get, what he wanted to get as the best interest of the country to try and get the vote through. And he assured me, don't worry, Gareth, Angela's going to give me what we want. Well, and I asked him directly, David, what if she doesn't? Don't worry, don't you trouble your little head, she will.
Do you think he was arrogant or complacent?
Yeah, the Tory party is riven with arrogance and complacency. They're just totally out of touch.
What I'm trying to get at is, do you think that Cameron was lackadaisical and complacent about the gravity of calling that referendum, and he just thought, it won't happen, I can win it, I just need to do this for internal party reasons, and he was arrogant about it?
Without question. But that's what we've been dealing with for many a long year now. The schisms within the Tory party, most recently being played out now with Truss and Kwarteng. The schism in the Tory party is just, we are jumping to the tune of trying to keep the factions of the Tory party happy. 100,000 people put Truss in place on an agenda which she's now saying is her mandate for the country. No, it's not. A very small percentage of the population voted to put you where you are.
Let's go back to the radical thing you did, because your parents were party members. As a boy, you canvassed for the Conservatives. You were a party member. You've always voted Conservative. You were a donor. You donated tens of thousands of pounds. Then you stopped being a donor, but not only did you fall out of love with the Conservative Party, you are now a member of the Labour Party. That is quite a journey. How on earth did that happen?
I believe the Labour Party under Starmer and his colleagues is a left-of-centre, clearly left, quite rightly, left-of-centre alliance. And so that, in many respects, is the ground the Tories claimed to have at one stage, but definitely no longer do. So, actually, yes, I've tacked marginally to the left, but it's not such a dramatic change.
And you not only joined Labour, but you attended the party conference in Liverpool. Presumably you'd been to a number of Tory party conferences as well, had you? Or
Nope.
You hadn't done that?
Never
Okay.
been. I had been invited and I had never gone.
So you'd never gone. You went to Labour. What was that like for you? Was it...
It was lovely. I mean, it was a bunch of incredibly friendly people who... So I should clarify. Jill, my wife, is a lifelong Labour supporter. So she's never been to conference, but she's brought up in Wolverhampton. She's always been a Labour supporter.
Gareth, you've donated £100,000 to the Labour Party.
Jointly with Jill.
That's
it's an absolute
you and Jill.
joy.
That's a lot of money.
We've been very lucky in business. So in the scheme of things, it's just the sort of amount we should do. And, you know, we need to put stuff back. And the mismatch, as I see it, between the funding of the two main parties is a big driver of that.
Just in terms of that, what do you get for that? I mean, do you get to meet Keir Starmer? Do you get to go... I mean, with the Conservatives, we can get onto this, but they would have special dinners for donors. What?
I've never met Keir Starmer.
What do you get for that? You get nothing?
Nothing. There's nothing I want. I just want there to be a right-thinking government in this country. And if I can play any part in that, financially and also, I hope, increasingly non-financially. You know, I'm a businessman. I mean, a lot of the left-wing part of the Labour Party think businessmen are the devil incarnate. I don't think that's right. But, of course, a lot of businessmen think that the Labour Party is the bad old Corbyn, Foot, whatever, which, again, is demonstrably not the case. So if I can contribute any way and lend a voice, then I owe it to give it back to the country.
And as a businessman, I just quickly want to ask you about the Mini, but I don't want to dwell too much on it because I want to talk about you and your family too. But you're a successful businessman, hugely successful, clearly. What was your immediate reaction to that Mini budget? Were you surprised about the market reaction?
No, because I think increasingly there are two things at play here. I think, one, there is a recognition that there needs to be change, and therefore people historically who would have liked all those sops to the rich themselves are saying, oh, this cannot happen. So a big part of the U-turn was driven by the rich saying, no, completely wrong. And I think, secondly, there is...
So can I just interrupt you? You presumably would have made a lot of money from the 45 pence. I don't know, I'm not going to ask you what your income is, but you presumably, I assume you pay taxes in a fair way and you pay your fair share of income tax and you don't try and do tax avoidance. You would have made a fortune from that.
Yeah,
move,
of course.
What, millions of pounds?
Not millions of pounds.
But hundreds of thousands of
pounds. Serious amounts of money.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds?
Over a period of the life of a parliament, yeah, absolutely. And also the other thing...
Didn't you want that?
No. Look, if I can't pay more than my fair share as a rich guy, what hope is there? I have to carry a greater burden on my back because there are people out there who over the last 15 years have not seen any change to their lives and they are in despair. And then we also have people who are on benefits, etc., who are now facing the prospect of a cut in real terms. People like me have to be caned and caned further. You know, this corporation tax, again, I'm a massive beneficiary of a cut in corporation tax. But what is the point? No, I couldn't give, as a businessman, I could not give a toss whether corporation tax is 19% or 25%.
So you felt that this sort of idea of compassionate conservatism that was part of Cameron's agenda, and then actually Theresa May, do you remember she talked about just about managing the jams, just about managing people. She talked a lot about wanting to help them. You felt that in this budget that was forgotten.
Totally. I mean, bankers' bonuses, obviously the U-turn on tax, corporation tax, not taxing the utility companies. I mean, what's all that about? This whole kamikaze budget should be withdrawn. Next week, earliest opportunity, everyone's back in Parliament, withdraw it.
But what about the cut in NI, national insurance for people? Or the cut, bringing forward the cut in income tax?
I can see that, well, I think there is a purist school of thought that shouldn't happen at the moment, that there are even greater priorities than that. But I know that will make me unpopular with everyone. But there are other ways you can deal with that with those on higher incomes. You know, I think it's farcical that I get a cut in my base rate of tax. That's ridiculous. And then the sort of tin-eared approach to bankers' bonuses. I mean, where's the logic? Apart from the fact that these people and the sort of energy companies who've paid $1 million to Boris, these are all part of the constituents in the back pocket.
You are, in a way, going against your self-interest in some of the things you're talking about. You are, you know, saying, I want to support a party that will probably tax you more, potentially. I mean, I don't know what Keir Starmer's tax plans are. He certainly indicated to me in an interview that he thought we should look more at wealth taxes, so taxing dividends and shares more. Lots of your friends who are business people that maybe vote Conservative, has this created a rift between you and other people?
No, not a rift. I mean, I think there's a respect for the view I've taken. The vast majority of people are saying, I totally understand why you've done it. I won't be voting Conservative. I'm not yet persuaded that I will go to Labour, but I'll listen to you, Gareth. But that is the virtual universe. No one no one from my Tory mates has reached out and said, you're mad.
OK. Let's go back to why you became a party donor in the first place. Like, why did you do it? Why did you think, I want to put... I mean, I think it was about £75,000 that you gave to the Conservatives. Again, a lot of money. Why did you do that?
Because I was very concerned in the run-up to Brexit, and I was fighting like mad to see if we could stay on our preferential... We've got the best of all possible worlds. So that was a big driver.
So you wanted to try and at least get in the room to make an argument?
Yes. But obviously that was... You know, I made my arguments, but unsuccessfully.
And I was going to ask you, I mean, I know a little bit about how it works because about the kind of tiered system that the Conservative had, but if you give us a certain amount of money, you get access, don't you, to the Prime Minister at dinners and events. Can you tell the viewers about that? Because for lots of people out there, they won't understand how it works. OK, so there are various tiers, of which the two top then, it may have changed now, were linked to the amount you gave a year. And the second tier got you cabinet ministers coming to have lunch with you, either in Westminster or in a club somewhere, and they would stand on their pins and say, everything in the garden's rosy, and we need to do this, and then there would be a sort of planted Q&A. I never got a queue, but they were planted, you know, the great and the good were allowed to ask one question each after lunch. There was also a higher tier, which is called, I can't remember what it's called, which was for those who gave a materially higher amount a year. And that got you, yes, access to Cameron. I was invited to some of those events, and I went to some of those events, which were small, round table, usually a dinner, when it would follow the same format, but it would go on for longer and, because alcohol was involved, be a bit more relaxed. When you look back on it now, do you think that's right that should happen?
I believed in what the party, a wing of the party, was trying to do. I was despairing of Corbyn. I mean, you know, I'm afraid there was a lesser evil than than Boris, and that was a greater evil than Boris, and that was Corbyn. So I wasn't looking for influence. Do I think it's right? No. In an ideal world, there would be no private funding of parties. Well, yeah. But I think that's very difficult to police. Where do you draw the line? There's going to be lots of grey areas. Well, I wasn't funding, I just did this for them, etc. So, but I agree, in an ideal world...
in an ideal world?
Private donor funding of political parties would be removed.
What about union funding?
Well, that's the flip side, because you couldn't take the private funding away from other parties and allow the unions... but, of course, there's a question mark about union funding at the moment, as I understand it.
I mean, the reason I ask is, and again, viewers might not know this, but of the 2019 general election, the Conservative Party donations accounted for just under 2/3 of all donations, £19.4 million. The Labour Party got 5.4 million. Of the Conservative donations, 13 million were from individuals, 5 million from companies. Labour got 160,000 from individuals, 200,000 from companies, more than 5 million from trade unions. So you could look at it and say, well, the Conservatives are in the pockets of wealthy individuals and Labour are beholden to the unions.
That's the clear and inescapable logic of those numbers. That obviously doesn't make them right, and I think we need to have that reformed, but that will take time.
And just one other question on this. The Chancellor meeting hedge fund managers on the day of that mini-budget. Do you think there should be an investigation into that meeting?
Yes, I mean, at the very least, it doesn't smell great.
Now, I'm just going to come on to you now. You've made millions as a businessman. You set up a legal recruitment firm. How did you take that path? I mean, you did that when you were 41 years old. You could have retired. You then set up another company.
I've just been lucky. I mean, you've mentioned Jill, my wife. One of the biggest pieces of luck was meeting her day one at Cambridge. We were 2 lawyers out of 7. She was from Wolverhampton, I was from Bedford. And we didn't go out at Cambridge, or indeed for 2 years afterwards. But we ended up living next door, renting houses next door, renting flats next door to each other, one road apart in Balham, Gateway to the south, and got together to have dinner and got together. And then married in 1990. And then in 1998, she joined the first recruitment business I had set up. She was a partner in a law firm, and she was doing an awful lot of work for our company. We were paying city partner rates, hourly rates. And she said, look, I'm a bit bored of law, why don't I come and join you in the business? So we've actually worked together day in, day out in the businesses since 1995.
And Jill, you had 4 children. You're very, very wealthy. She always worked. She didn't have to, but she always worked.
Yeah, I mean, Jill made partner at 27. That's unbelievable for any sex in the city, in a law firm. She's a phenomenally able, bright woman with enormous capacity. We knew we wanted to have a tribe of children. We always absolutely shared childcare. I mean, if she was sitting here, she would say, yeah, I mean, one of the kids was sick, then it wasn't the default that it's Jill who wouldn't go to work. Yeah. I had my own business. I could be and needed to be as flexible. So, look, she got from a state school to Cambridge, given, we're talking about state school educations. She got from state school to Cambridge, read law, made partner at 27. I mean, her career has always been every bit as important as mine.
So she's been a mum, she's worked hard, she's a role model. Presumably you've got your 4 children, your 3 boys, and your daughter, Loveday. And I hope you don't mind me asking you about this, but a few years ago, Loveday suffered at the hands of cyberbullies. She was just 16 and she was doing her GCSEs. Do you mind telling me what happened?
Loveday was at an all-girls school, a really good all-girls school in Surrey. And because she had 3 older brothers, she's always been fairly out there. She's used to dealing with boys. And then she went to an all-girls school. But she was still very out there and still very outspoken, and still, if she saw something unjust happen to one of her friends, particularly at the hands of a boy, she would shout about it and remonstrate and get involved. There was a boys' school directly next door to her school, separated only by an iron chain link fence. And the boys at that school, a small handful of them, decided that because Loveday was not a size 8 and not what they saw as feminine perfection aged 16, they made her life hell. And this was at a time when there was a lot of experimentation going on with social media. They derided her for her size, and unsurprisingly, because social media is a very cruel beast.
What happened with Loveday? Did it get worse for her then?
Yeah, she missed most of her lower 6th and upper 6th.
Right.
She still got into a great university. She got into Exeter, but coinciding with a relationship ending just as she went to Exeter, she then went completely off the rails, and we ended up sitting in a mental health ward, locked, with the first set of doctor having signed the papers for her to be committed. And we sat there waiting for the second doctor to arrive. And I have to say, as a dad, seeing your daughter go through that is intolerably hard.
That must have been absolutely awful.
And still is. And I found it very difficult to talk about it, to enunciate it, because blokes don't. And it got to the stage where Jill had to be in Loveday's room in university in her first year, sleeping in the room to stop Loveday doing bad things.
What, hurting herself?
Yeah.
That...
And that's where we ended up then at the Priory, waiting for the second doctor to come along to section her. Fortunately, during that 3-hour wait, Loveday something changed in her mind. And I don't know how she would describe it. And when the second doctor came along and asked exactly the same question, the first question is, Loveday, if your parents and I were to leave the room now, what would you do? And the first doctor was told, I will kill myself.
Oh, goodness.
By the time the second doctor had left us stewing for 3 hours, Loveday said, I need to go back to university. I've had enough of this. And the turning point was something I think I believe it's the turning point. If you're in a room like that, with a threat to yourself, the bathroom door is not a door. It's a half swing door. And Loveday, being the proud girl she is, she looked at that and said, well, where's the bathroom door? And the doctor said, well, given what you've just told me,
I can't leave you.
I can't leave you. And so she said, well, OK, well, will the nurses be at the outside room? And will they be female nurses? And again, she got the answer, no, we can't guarantee what sex the nurses will be. And that was, I don't know whether it was that, but there was just a sea change in attitude.
My final question for you, just in terms of Loveday and then the knock-on effect about social media for the minds of young men and young women. The government's online harms safety bill was introduced this year. Do you think social media companies have a responsibility to protect people like your daughter, or do you think it's more about education of young adults to understand what behaviours are acceptable online, or is it a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both. The second will just take a very long time, because it's not just young adults. I mean, it's older people as well who just have a very, very strange attitude, whether it's to the opposite sex or to another race or whatever. So I think it needs to be both, but fundamentally, those involved in those industries have an obligation to cure the problem and do it very, very quickly on pain of company life-threatening fines. That's the only message they're going to get.
Maybe that's a policy Labour might change if they do get into government at the next election. But Gareth, thank you so much for coming in, and I'm really glad that Loveday is better and doing some really exciting work. It's really great. So thank you so much. Thanks for coming to talk to me today. It was a real pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me, Beth.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that's all for today's show. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to the Beth Rigby Interviews podcast, a new episode available now. Each week I take a look at the highlights of the interviews, and there's some extra bits in there too. That's on the Sky News app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to our guests, and I'll see you next week.